Welcome to the February meeting of the Larchmont Mamaroneck Interfaith Council. I am so pleased to present Shannon Turner Porter, who is a teacher of social studies here at Mamaroneck High School. And you've been here for how many years, Shannon?
39.
Excellent. And I had the pleasure of 3 years teaching across the hall from Shannon, and it was great. And Shannon has a very busy schedule, and we are so happy that you took time out.
I'm
for
glad
Shannon.
it could work out.
Yeah,
You
it
know,
wasn't
even though I
easy.
don't see other people, so I'd say welcome to all the members of your group.
Well.
And it's nice to have this chance to
Yeah.
talk to you.
Great.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
So I guess today what I was going to talk about is just religion from the African American perspective, and then what religion meant to the slaves, and the difficulty they had in worshiping their religion. And I would say that today it still is a very important part of the life of many, many people, including myself. And there's a lot of connection between the way our ancestors did in the past and what goes on today. Some of the same songs and same spirituals were there. And if you have questions, you can interrupt me, as we go through. Okay. That's fine, right? So I guess one of the things I was thinking about during slavery is kind of interesting because the Africans were brought from all parts of Africa, mostly West Africa, but even though there were people who were brought from the southern part and walked up to the west is where most of the ships would come out. And there were religions there before they came to this country, and there was some influence from Islam, and also animism, which is sort of a worship of nature and certain objects. And they did believe in a supreme being, so it depended upon where you were. And it's interesting that they would bring many of their ideas here to America, but then things change because families were broken. A lot of people were mixed, different groups were mixed together. And in the beginning, if you were a Christian, it was good because Christianity meant that you couldn't be a slave until many of the the white plantation owners realized that religion could be liberated, could mean freedom. Then they began to change the concept that just because you become a Christian, it doesn't mean that you can't be a slave. So that was kind of changed so that they could still maintain that. And I'm just really skipping about a little bit, but there were laws where blacks could not read and write. So there was a fear if they learned how to read the Bible, then you could read, that could lead to a desire to be free. But some people did. They did learn how to read the Bible. And it's an interesting story. During the 1820s and 30s, you had two major slave revolts. There was one, Denmark Vesey in the 1820s, and then Nat Turner. And Nat Turner believed, they thought he was like a prophet, and he had these visions. And they were probably an eclipse or something natural that happened, but he said it was a message from God and for them to revolt. And he does lead a revolt where about 61 whites were killed. And after his revolt, there was really a clamp down on letting the Africans read and write because he could read the Bible, he could interpret it. And they used some of the stories from the Bible that meant, freedom. Like the story, with the Jews, the Hebrew children.
The Exodus?
Yeah, they related it to, this could happen to you. We can become free.
Right.
So then it was like not safe for them to use the Bible or allow them to use the Bible, even though some people could read it. So they had different ways of practicing the religion. Now, many of them would go to the white churches, and or they would restrict them. They would put them up in the balcony, or they had a white preacher, or they would preach. I was reading one story, and the slave said that the master would say, you are supposed to obey your master. You're supposed to do what he tells you to do. So this is how they were getting the message from, that was supposed to be the message from the preacher. It was more like making them obey.
So the slave owners basically used the minister or the preacher to help enforce
Yeah, enforce and
The
control
position.
and respect the master. You have to respect your master, your mistress, and that was one way of controlling the slaves. You know, they used physical force to control, and then this whole spiritual religious force to also control them. But then the slaves knew better, and they had their own method of doing worshiping. So one really interesting thing they would do is when they did get together, they had this huge tub, and they would put water in it, and they had to stand very close to it so the water would hold the sound of their voices. However that works, you know, they have this tub in the middle, and they just walk around it, or they talk and had to sing very low, but the water would muffle. And then the other thing I read is that they often would put like some type of quilt or something over their head to kind of keep the sound down.
Were they forbidden?
Yeah, because
they were
they
forbidden
didn't
to
want them to
worship?
get together at night by themselves unless they had somebody around. But they would sneak and have their own church. You know, they have their own praying and singing, and somebody would tell a story, you know, and they would talk about the biblical stories, and then they would sing the songs that would relate to how they felt. So they had their own way of doing it. And sometimes there's one story the lady said that the master would come and say, "Why are you keeping too much noise? And God doesn't like all this noise, you know." So they had to do things secretly, you know. But then they were allowed to sing a lot of songs because the masters didn't always know what the songs meant.
Right.
So many of the spirituals that we have today were like slave songs, you know. And I had some examples of one. They were like slave codes to escape. The song "Still Away." You familiar with that song? Still away home, still away to Jesus.
Yeah.
Ain't got long to be here.
Away. Yeah.
And it's really still away to freedom. So it was kind of a code.
Okay.
They had code words. There was another very famous one I'm sure you heard of, "Follow the Drinking Gourd."
That's the one I've heard of.
Yeah.
What was that?
And
What
that was about the Big Dipper in the sky and the shape of it, so it'd be pointed north.
The North
and they
Star.
followed that direction. And then when the trees, following the dead trees along the way.
And supposedly that was a code, and the owners didn't know that that's what that read.
Right, yes. And so I was thinking of, one particular song. It says, "Follow the drinking gourd, for the old man is walking, for to carry you to freedom. If you follow the drinking gourd, the river bank will make a very good road. The dead trees show you the way. Left foot, peg foot, traveling on, follow the drinking gourd." So it was like an oral map telling them what to do, how to do it, you know. Then there's a song called "Wade in the Water." And that you get into the water, and the water's chilly. Because sometimes to escape, you go into the water, you can get rid of the smell. You know, if they put the dogs
if they
after
have
you,
the
because you
dogs.
go through the water. The water might be cold, but it's not to your soul. It's not, you know, it might be
Yeah.
chilly, it might be cold, but it's okay. You
You
can get
lose
away.
you lose the scent.
Yeah.
The dogs lose the scent.
Yeah. And then the other songs, you know, "When I Get to Heaven," and heaven could be Canada or the North, or you know, that's what that was about. So it's believed that these songs all had codes and different things. It was a way of communicating, and they could communicate right in front of the white master or his helper, and they wouldn't know what they're talking about.
Right.
So they kind of created their own song. They even made fun of the master in front of his face, and they didn't know it.
They didn't get it.
Because they
So
developed
singing
their
was
own
allowed.
language. Yeah.
Now, what about
Drumming wasn't allowed either. Drumming, they couldn't drum.
just singing?
The singing, they would let them do that. But drumming was something that was banned because in Africa you could send messages using drums.
Oh, really?
So they actually banned the drums throughout the South, just as they had banned reading and writing.
You think that they'd have been smart enough to realize if the drums are making a code, songs certainly could.
Yeah, what? I don't know, because you know what people use, a lot of the Africans use songs, and they brought some of that all from Africa, because when they're working, I've been to Africa and just watched the fishermen, and when they're pulling in, and then they have this song, you know, and they move with the song. It kind of gives you, I guess it helps, it gives you that rhythm, and you can do the work. So it's always, there's certain work songs you have. people working on the railroad. It just makes it a little easier. So it's something that the Africans always had with them. You know, even though they tried to change some of the religion or the Christianity, they still put in the African part of the spirit. And the one thing a lot of the whites didn't like was the emotional part. And African Americans always put that emotional, the dance and the singing. And even today, if you were to go to church, say, even if you came to my church, there's a lot of emotion. There's clapping, you know. The guy would say, if you're alive, you're thankful, you know, use your hands, you know, just don't sit there, you know, you're glad you're here. So people are yelling, and they some people get happy, as they say, they get the spirit, and they shout. So the same thing happened even during the slave time, you know. But it's a lot of action. Yeah, if you were to go into the average Baptist church,
Interaction, not just the
you're saying
the
amen.
minister.
He's preaching, yeah. He's preaching, but you're responding, and he needs you to respond.
Amen. I
Yes.
love that part of the inauguration when the last preacher, when he finished, he said, "Say amen,
Yeah.
say amen, say
Say
amen,"
amen.
3 times. And I was home, and it felt so good to say amen,
Yeah,
to be part
but you know
of
it's
it.
interesting. I never after that
Lowry.
speech. Yeah,
Lowry.
one of my students came to the class. I said, so I was getting there, how they felt about it. This one kid, what about all this religious stuff? We're supposed to have separation of religion and state.
Ooh.
I said, well, we say freedom of, we don't say freedom from, you know, so there's nothing wrong with that. I said, look at your dollar bill. Maybe you can give me that. So it has, "In God we trust." You don't want that, you know, so he was laughing. But some of the kids just felt that that was out of place, that we shouldn't have any of that. So there's, yeah, it's a really,
Interesting.
because they see their interpretation of freedom from, you know, separation of freedom and state as being no mention of God, anything. They didn't understand why that was necessary. And then I don't think they quite understood some of the things he was saying in that prayer. Because
I
he
loved it.
he used an expression, I guess we kind of jumped around a little bit, but he used an expression about white doing what's right and yellow is metal. And people didn't quite understand that. They said, "Oh, he was being racist." I said, "No, he was using an expression from the past." When I grew up,
You've heard that
oh yeah,
before?
when I grew up, if you're white, you're right. If you're brown, stick around. If you're black, get back. And that was an expression, especially in the South. So the darker you were, the more you were out. If you're white, you were in, you're at the top. If you're brown, you could kind of stick around because you're closer to white. But if you're black, you stay back.
So that was a
So
historical.
he did,
was bringing
he
in a
did it. He
historical-
turned it around. You know, yellow being mellow, and then brown sticking around. You know, it's just.
Oh, so it was a play
used,
on
yeah,
it.
yeah, he did. But you
Oh.
know, when you're talking to an audience and you have a different generation, they don't know.
Yeah, I
It's
didn't
like,
know.
what is this guy talking about? You know.
Yeah, so it was an old sort of
It's an
poem
expression,
or
yeah.
expression, and
It was an
then
expression of
he tailored
feeling.
it, yeah.
You know, it
I liked
affected
it.
it affected black people to say, if you're black, stay back, because people didn't like the color, and parents
what
had
they
to
felt.
explain to kids that parents often, black parents, made a difference of their children, the lighter one versus the darker one, the good hair versus the nappy hair. And that was a very bad thing, because if you were light, you were considered superior, closer to being white. You know, just like doing slavery, if you worked in a house, the house slave had a higher status than the field slave.
Right.
And sometimes they would be of the lighter complexion.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the lightness comes from the mixture of the black and the whites with the
course, of the-
sex and
of the
everything.
slave owners.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure, and the
So
rape.
so that just carried on within our culture about being light skinned.
So within the culture, even within a family, there would maybe be favoritism.
separation, yeah. And that all comes from what we inherited, you know, if you go back to slavery. So just going back to religion, you know, religion was something that was used as a way of feeling better and dealing with their very painful situation. Even though what the master said was quite different from the way you interpret religion. You know, his was to kind of keep you under control.
Right.
And for the African Americans, a way of dealing with the pain, dealing with the struggle every day. And that one day I'm going to be
And
free.
holding on to the hope.
Yeah. So there's a story of one slave who was listening to the master preach. This person preached white preacher, and he says, "Am I going to be free when I get to heaven?" So the guy just kept talking. He said, "Am I going to be free?" He couldn't get an answer. And he left. He never came back to the church because the preacher was saying, "Well, it depends on what you do, whether you're going to be free or not. You know,
In
if
heaven?
you obey, if you obey and do what you're supposed to do, maybe you're going to be free." And they said the guy never came back to church. He died. So they said, "Well, I guess he going to find out now whether he's free or not in heaven," because they couldn't quite understand. Do you have to wait until you get to heaven to be free? Now, will I be free when I get to heaven? Because how you interpret that meaning, you know.
I know.
So
They
it's-
couldn't even allow that.
Yeah,
That-
yeah,
that-
yeah. So,
Well, that
They even allow
attacked their
that.
whole system.
yeah,
I
it did.
mean,
That's true.
basically.
Yeah, because if you want to control someone, you have to control their mind, you control their body. So the religion, if you taught the religion, you have to accept what they taught you. That's also was a control. And some black writers feel that religion was a control, and it made people meek and submissive. That wasn't good. It wasn't good. But on the other hand, it just gave people a lot of strength. So today, you know, people would say my minister, others would say, what would our ancestors have done had it not been for religion? If you did not believe that eventually things would get better, you have to have that faith.
I agree.
You have to have faith. If you don't have faith, then you don't have very much, you know, and that's how people survive.
Yeah, I
So-
agree. And the singing and the songs. And one song I wanted to ask you about, of course, Swing Low, Sweet Chariot.
Yeah, that was another code song, you
Was
know.
it?
Yeah, they've
Coming-
often said that was coming, chariot coming to get me, coming
Home.
to take you
Getting
home.
home.
Yeah.
And home wasn't dying
This could
and
di-
it wasn't heaven.
No, this is part of the Underground Railroad. You know, the Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. The chariot could be that train, even though it wasn't a train, but it's going to be
Metaphor.
some way of for getting you to freedom. Because they had that code, you know, Harriet Tubman would lead people to freedom, and they would go to safe houses. I think there was a place here in the Manor that's
Yes.
supposed to have been for the Underground Railroad. I don't know exactly where.
Larchmont Mamaroneck, yeah, I went to a meeting at St. John's and there was the
Yeah,
Underground Railroad
yeah.
here. I'm not sure where.
So all these are
For
safe
somebody.
places, safe havens, and people can go to. But that was
And
the
that's
song.
the reference.
Yeah, yeah. You know, the chariot, whatever's going to come, the train is going to come take you home. There's another song. Say I went down the valley, pray, couldn't hear anyone pray. And it was basically saying that people didn't show up. Somebody might have told about a meeting. So you kind of give that message, like I went down to pray all by myself. You know, they had different ways of letting people
Saying
know.
what happened. There
Yeah,
might have
either
been a
don't
meeting
show
that
up,
they said-
and people, because somebody will always tell.
Right.
Sometimes
So
there were
had
slaves who
creative things.
felt loyal to their master
Or
and
who
would
were
tell.
threatened or.
Yeah, yeah. Even with the slave revolts, they usually someone told,
Right.
and they would get caught.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
these were all code songs and
Yeah,
code
yeah.
messages.
So I think, you know, that's the most historians feel that they were code. They were certain symbols and they were crosses, and a lot of people believe that the Africans had voodoo. They practiced voodoo because it might have been in Africa. You have these fetishes, or you have certain symbols and certain things that have special meaning, and some of those were brought here. Like there were certain plants that they believed that could heal you.
Oh, okay.
You know, which may, I mean,
Roots.
yeah.
Sure.
So
Which we
roots.
still
When I
use
grew up in
today.
the South, my grandmother could go into the woods. She knew certain things. She knew what could get, and it could heal you. And I'm sure that's where they get medicine from.
I'm
in a way.
sure.
They-
Oh, they
but
sure
but
they
she
were.
knew that. But then there were people who we said worked roots on you. They believed in I don't know, cast a spell on you. So they it's like a voodoo type of
Sort of
thing.
a superstition.
So they would go to this special doctor and they would do all these, I don't know, there's secret stuff that they would do. But, because someone believed that this woman was really interested in my grandfather, and she brought him some candy, and someone said you're supposed to sprinkle salt on this step when she leaves because it'll kill whatever spirit she brought in. I don't know whether that was true or not. On New Year's Day, to this day, I don't go out. I don't visit. Because when I came up, my grandmother said women are not allowed to visit on New Year's Day. Because a man's supposed to come to your house first and brings you good luck. And she said one year all her chickens died because this woman came to her house. Now, I don't know whether to believe that or not, but there were those beliefs. And
Sure.
a lot of them came down from their African ancestors
Okay.
about what women couldn't do or what you're not, certain days you didn't visit.
Well,
And
it's
maybe
the
it's some
same
truth.
in like any culture, like, German Americans, you're supposed to eat that herring. Pickled herring is going to bring you financial security.
Yeah.
I remember my grandmother saying that, and I hated it. And
So New Year's Day for us, it was the black-eyed peas and collard greens.
Yeah.
The collard greens will bring you dollar bills, black-eyed peas some change.
that's what you were cooking
So
when I called you.
yes, yeah, on New Year's Day, and then I didn't go out. Now, why
That's where
didn't
you were home.
I still stay home? Maybe because people have been out on New Year's Eve, they stay home anyway. But it's a
Rest.
thing about, it's just one of those traditions.
Yeah.
So, for an example, on Sundays, when we grew up, you were not allowed to do work. On the seventh day, God rested. You were supposed to rest. It was going to church, and visit your family and friends, and that's it. You couldn't use scissors. You couldn't sew.
So very
You couldn't
much
go to the grocery
influence
store.
of religion and the Lord's Day.
Still very, very strong. You
Yes.
did not work on that day.
Yeah.
That was a special day. And now people shop
The
and do
stores.
everything on the store. But we had those blue laws, even those were from the colonial period, where the liquor stores could not be open on Sundays. I think now it's 12 o'clock.
12 o'clock. Yeah.
Before, in most places, you still have that restriction. But a lot of it all comes from religion and the belief there.
Well,
Shannon,
then
I'm
you
sorry.
had to do all your cooking on Saturday then.
Well, they cook on Sundays. Now they
They
cook.
did.
We only had 2 meals. We had a full breakfast, and you had a little prayer service on Sunday morning. So everybody had to say a Bible verse around the table, and it was special prayer. And we had a special breakfast. The breakfast was like a dinner almost, because you had your eggs and your grits, and then you would have your fried chicken, and you have your gravy and your biscuits. All that's for breakfast.
That was breakfast.
That was breakfast, just Sunday. Very
Special,
special. A lot of
special,
food.
yeah.
But you did your prayer, and it was a family prayer time, and you did your Bible verse. Then you went to church, and and your mom would cook dinner while she's cooking breakfast, so she's done by the time church is over. She's cooked, and then that's what you eat for the rest of the day, and then you visit family.
That's
Or
nice.
you,
That's kind of a nice custom.
yeah, you just didn't do anything. Now that doesn't stay with me today, unfortunately.
No, you're a little
It's doing
busy.
schoolwork.
You're a little busy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had a question about when did the black churches, did the slaves, or I guess when they were freed historically?
Yeah,
when
but
was
even
the
before.
establishment of the
Yeah. Well, actually, it
African-American
goes, you can
churches?
go back to the colonial period. Some of the early churches were created in Georgia and South Carolina. But the blacks in the North who were not under slavery were creating churches.
Oh, okay.
And then historically, it's during this time we call the Great Second Awakening, which was like the 1840s. It was just revival period with people going around preaching under tents.
Right.
Outdoor
Oh,
revivals,
okay,
black
right.
and white. And people like Richard Allen, who had created his own church, and it's like in the 1830s, 1840s. That's also during a time of a lot of reforms in our history, and it's a time of women fighting for their rights.
Oh,
and
okay.
It's the beginning of that Susan B. Anthony, that period, and you had a lot of ministers, people preaching. So it was during that time period that a lot of churches began to establish,
Okay.
especially in the North. I went to Mother Bethel, which is one of the original, the Methodist church in Philadelphia. And that was a church where the blacks could sit up in the balcony, but they couldn't come to the main part. And then they created the church for themselves. Once they pulled out. Then after the Civil War, people really created their own churches.
Yeah.
But it actually started during the colonial period.
So in
and
the
then it continued, yeah, in
1700s.
1700s. But then in the 1800s, they really began to grow. And a lot of blacks became Baptists. And then it would grow more after the Civil War. But in the South, it would grow fast in the North because they didn't have slavery. The states had outlawed slavery in the North.
Okay.
Yeah. So you had those churches. And they separated because they weren't treated equally in the church.
Right.
And their
Right.
worship service was different.
Yeah.
And it was a little more emotional. And then the church became and which it is today, the center of politics of everything. So when I was in the civil rights movement, the church was where we met. You couldn't meet in the city hall or in a
Right.
city building.
Right.
Everything took place in the church.
Okay.
We had our meetings, we had our planning session, where we're going to demonstrate, how we're going to do it, how we would train how to be nonviolent. That was all in the church.
Was this in the South?
In the
Shannon?
South, in North Carolina, yeah. So the same thing, if you look at Dr. King, everything was in the church. The church is center for politics. And so right to this day, politicians will come to black churches
Oh,
when they're
yes.
campaigning.
That's right.
They
sure.
show up
That's right.
because that's,
did. I remember
yeah,
that.
oh yeah, that's the place
Okay.
you want to go. And if you want to get someone to vote for you, you go that direction.
Okay.
So like my pastor said, I know who I'm voting for, Obama, I don't know who you voting for, but, there was, and then
It came
people
out there,
came.
yeah.
And I remember, just recently, because there was someone from Larchmont who came to the church. So they come, sometime they let them speak, sometime they don't. Most of the time, they just have them to stand up and state that they are running for a particular office. A lot of them are like,
Acknowledge their
yeah.
presence.
And then some of the politicians come and stay the whole Sunday. I think there's one, the county, what's his name?
The legislator, George
No,
Latimer?
the county official. Who's the head?
Spano?
Spano.
Oh, Spano.
He'll go around, I think he goes around to different churches. He's actually come and spent the whole Sunday.
Really?
So I don't know what his
Oh.
politics are, well, I'm sure it's a
Is
little
there
bit with that.
food? Is there food after the service?
Not every service, sometimes. We do
Sometimes.
eat quite a bit at the churches, yeah. We have dinners, we have different dinners. So I do a study session, which is not a Bible class, just for homework. And we always feed them on once a week, we do that. But there's always food with different groups. So
That's great.
That's the other thing. There are churches who actually have dinners. And that's how a lot of churches were able to survive, is through raising money by selling food.
Oh,
The chicken dinners and the fish dinners. That's how these churches in the South survived.
Yeah.
Because you had no other source of money but
Of income.
people, the
Right.
tithe who paid the money with church, and that's how you raise money. So
I think churches in a lot of areas, like I grew up in the Midwest, and there were fish fries, chicken dinners, as a way of raising money.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
think the whites learned from the blacks
they
how
did
to
both,
do it.
yeah.
Right.
But now that these new style ministers tell you, if you tithe, you don't need to do all these chicken dinners and fish dinners. You can give the money that you would give for that. You can just donate.
But isn't that a loss of like
Well,
community?
there's a whole community, yeah, that's that argument. But I think
Yeah.
they're trying to get people away from,
The
they
old
want people
ways.
to just tithe and to give your 10%.
Is there
or
a
whatever.
tithe? Is
The Baptists,
They
yeah,
ask
they,
for
they,
10%?
oh, yeah, they do. Every Sunday, they give you
That's
this little
probably
speech.
hard too.
Yeah, 10%,
10% is a
yeah.
lot.
There are people who give more there than they would give outside. There are people who are very faithful, and they would give their 10%
That's
of whatever
awesome.
they earn.
That's a
So,
commitment.
It's a
That's
commitment.
A real commitment.
As one girl told me, she says, I pay God first, then she pays her bills.
Very nice.
So, that's that dedication. That's how you make your church grow. You have to have the money because it's expensive to
Right.
run now.
Right.
And, some churches become very, very large now. So have
Well,
2
I
or
know.
3 services,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
in one day.
Now, I'm going to ask an Obama question.
Yeah, okay.
He seems to be, well, he says he's a God-fearing man, right?
Mm-hmm,
So I'm just, do you have any thoughts on him and religion? Well, he certainly had.
You had a controversy there for a while, right?
Well,
With his-
I'm not, you can
Yeah.
go there. I'm not. I was just thinking of all
No,
the
it's
prayers
interesting,
he
but-
had
yeah,
and
yeah, I
everything.
think he
He's clearly
is-
a man, and he did belong to that church in Chicago,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
he's looking for a new church.
And what I would say is that ministers come out with some very strange things. You don't have to believe them. My minister has a thing that he gets on. And every time he has a whole thing with the homosexuality, and a lot of Baptist members do. And I'm sitting there, and some days I'm like, why is he ranting about this? And I just, I listen. I don't believe the same thing he believes, but that's part of his teaching, his belief, and that is wrong, and you should not do it. And there are many members there who believe that. But I just okay, I just have to listen to
Wait
it.
for it to
So
go.
the same thing, I think with Obama, the thing that Obama said about Reverend Wright is that he acted as if changes have not been made. You know, and I think that was a key point because he ranted and raved about America's this, America's that. And because you are in a church where you might have a leader with these views, does not mean that you believe everything they believe. And, you know, because when people got so upset about it, I'm like, why are they so upset? Every church has some minister who's going to have a particular belief that's not going to be what you believe in.
Right.
Unfortunately, we often say, with him, I think we just felt that he believed the same thing. And he had to take that stand. You know, he had to take a stand. He had to separate himself. So he's a spiritual person. I believe he's definitely a spiritual person.
He is.
And he believed in that. And he wanted, because he was asked whether he should say, after he took the oath, so help me God, that was not in the Constitution. George Washington actually started that
Oh, really?
as the first president. When he finished the oath, he said, so help me God. And after George Washington, everybody else started saying that. So it's not written in the
It's just a
Constitution.
tradition.
It's a tradition. That's what they call the unwritten Constitution. And maybe a couple presidents didn't do it. So he was asked, did he want to say that? He said, yes, I do. But even though the Chief Justice didn't get the oath right, he thought he could memorize it, but then he did it again. So
That was funny.
yeah. So I think, you know, and the minister he invited to speak, Rick Warren, was controversial.
He was
Now, there are
controversial.
people in my church who read his book. They love his book. They had a whole women's session, you know, this book, The Purpose-Driven
Yeah,
Life.
Purpose-Driven Life.
A lot of people read that book. They loved the
And
book.
love it and swear by
And
it.
I wasn't even aware that he was very homosexual, anti-gay until they started talking about it.
Right.
And so that was a big complaint about having him be the
I
speaker.
thought Obama
So
was
again,
great.
this is another,
He had
yeah,
a cross-section.
yeah. So this is another minister that believes something that's kind of different.
Right.
And
And he's saying, well, there's room for disagreement.
Yeah,
But he's
yeah,
saying we can
yeah.
disagree without being disagreeable.
yeah, yeah.
And then Lowry, I love Lowry because that was an
That
old-fashioned.
Lowry was he
Is he
gave the
from the
benediction.
South?
He's from the South. He also helped to organize the Southern Christian Leadership with Dr. King.
Oh, really?
So he was with
Oh,
Dr.
so
King.
he's real historical.
He is.
Yeah.
He is
A historical
He was with
person.
Dr. King.
Oh,
So that's a connection.
a really good connection.
Yeah, very
that he
good
brought in.
connection with that history and everything else that he brought in. Yeah.
I'd like to know what the history of the AME church is.
But I don't know all of it, but I know with Richard Allen is one of the founders of that church, because Methodist was one of the main religion during the 1830s, and a lot of African Americans joined. That's interesting. I read a book years ago about the Methodists and then the Baptists. Methodists were a little more sophisticated, and it was a class thing. The people who went to the Methodist church were generally your middle class, what we call the bourgeois, the upper class blacks, and the Baptists were the regular because it was more emotional. I think E. Franklin Frazier, I love him. He was this black sociologist, wrote a book, and he was saying how there are people when they go to church and they got on their fur coat and you know, you lean it back and the label has actually been turned around so people can see it. So
By
it was a
accident.
kind of a class type of thing, because Methodists are not as emotional, for the most part, as Baptists. So that kind of separated, because even among blacks, not all blacks had the same type of religion. Some of them were the real Pentecostal. There was one particular thing that they had brought, I believe, from Africa called shouting, and they would go around this circle and they kind of repeat this song, and they get so emotional that the women, people would fall out. So some churches cut that out, you know, they didn't like that. So when I grew up, they had something we call the Holiness Church, or the Pentecostal church. And you go there, and the women didn't wear lipstick or makeup, and it was they would fall out on the floor. They would talk in tongues. So that's a whole
Interesting.
different, yeah.
Nobody
yeah.
fell asleep during
No,
the
no.
service.
I mean, it was, and they were complaining about the Baptists and how they're the real religion. So you have many different groups within, say, the black population itself.
As within
Yeah.
the white population,
Yeah,
many
yeah.
different groups.
Because some like a lot of emotion, and others take very sophisticated. You sit, you listen, you learn, and
Okay.
you go.
It's the
So-
same in
so I think
both
that,
churches.
but there's a lot more to the history of that
Right,
church.
doesn't the E stand for Episcopalian?
Yeah, it's was it American, the AME is American Methodist Episcopal, yeah, it's a combination. I think there's some closeness in some of their belief between the Episcopal churches and the Methodist churches. There's some
Okay.
similarities with their
Because it
views.
seemed like the combination just didn't
Yeah,
quite go
yeah,
together.
yeah. It's just like with the Baptists, the white Southern Baptists, and then the which is kind of different from the blacks, in a sense. I don't think they're in the same organization.
No, there's
No, I don't think
No,
so
no, they're
either.
different organization. But I think they've tried to make some.
Yeah.
It's just because of the racism and other stuff, that's been there. So,
Now, did you want to read something to us?
well, there was a, I think it was this one thing about, and talking about the religion, and one of the songs here, it says slaves had many meanings, a means of resisting the dehumanization of slavery. Religion became one of them. It became a purifying force in the life of the slaves, a release from the everyday misery. And through the religious songs they made up from biblical stories, they expressed their real feelings about slavery. And this particular song, it says, "Did my Lord deliver Daniel? Didn't Daniel deliver Daniel? Did my Lord deliver Daniel? Then why not every man? He delivered Daniel from the lion's den, Jonah from the belly of the well, the Hebrew children from the fiery furnace. Then why not every man? Joshua fit the battle of Jericho. Jericho. That was another song. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down.
Right.
And then another, oh Mary, don't you weep, don't you moan. Oh Mary, don't you weep, don't you moan, 'cause Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh Mary, don't you weep. One of these mornings at 5 o'clock, this old world's going to reel and rock. Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh Mary, don't you weep. Don't know why, what my mother wants to stay here for. This old world ain't no friend to her." And one of the greatest black religious songs, the slaves took the story of Samson, and with their genius for going to the core of an experience, they put these words into Samson's mouth and expressed their deepest feeling. If I had my way, if I had my way, if I had my way, I'd tear this building down. So they had, all these are different songs, and
Well, they had knowledge of the Bible.
they had
when
had
wrote
knowledge of the
those.
Bible.
Yes.
There were people who could read the Bible,
Yes.
and they told the stories, and that was one of the reasons why the Bible could be almost subversive for the slaves, because
All
they
of
learned
them.
these stories and then they
Sure.
connected it. So Harriet Tubman, for example, was called the Black Moses,
Sure.
because she
She
led
was
all the
leading
people.
them.
She led 300 people out of slavery. I mean, she had the help of a pistol, because if somebody decided they didn't want to go, she said, "You have a choice: you go or you die."
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know she had
She
that.
never
had a
lost.
gun?
She had a gun.
Oh.
She told, and she never lost a passenger. Everybody went.
I never
Everybody
knew that.
went.
I
She
never
didn't
knew
want
that.
them to go telling
No,
anything.
no,
You
it was
go,
dangerous.
You go.
You go, or you don't. Then I'm not gonna leave you here. You have to
Okay.
go.
Okay. Well, it
So
worked.
and they did, yeah, they did. So that was just one of the
What
things.
book is that,
This is a
Shannon?
great book, To Be a Slave, and Julius Lester. I've used it. So what it is just a series of interviews were done. During the New Deal period,
Oh.
and then they did all these. They gathered information.
And they were slaves
and they
living then,
yeah,
yeah.
people. They descendants or they had been slaves, yeah.
Right.
And so they collected all this information, and these are just documents,
Oh,
different
great.
stories,
I'm gonna write this
how
down.
they escaped. Yeah, it's a great little book.
Thank you.
But you can give you some background.
Thank you, Shannon.
Okay, I know we kind of talked all
That
over
was
the
fun.
place,
That
but
was
I don't
fun.
know. Do you think it's anything else?
I-
So religion is still important.
Yeah.
We still go through changes. Even during slavery, most of the people were women in the churches. Even today, the majority of people in churches are women.
Okay.
They don't necessarily run the churches, but they,
It's the same in.
in all churches,
Yeah,
the women.
yeah.
And the church is still a center for politics, for
Right.
religion, to help people, meetings.
community, to
It's
help the
community,
community.
it's connected. My church is in the process of building senior citizen housing.
Excellent.
we had to fight for it because a lot of people don't want that building, the building in their community.
Right.
But, so they're doing a lot of good
That's
things, you
excellent.
know, to help
Yeah.
people and to get people to vote and all those things.
Yeah.
So it's still,
very
it's still there.
important in the community.
It's still very
and-
important, yeah, yeah.
That's great.
So
Shannon.
good. I hope
Thank
I
you. That was
helped a little
interesting.
bit.
That
Good,
was
good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And
All right.
especially when we have a reference here.
Yeah,
To be
he
a
is
slave
to
by
be a
Julius
slave.
Lester.
Excellent.
He writes.
Stuff.
He's written his autobiography stuff. Also, he
He's
has
an interesting.
great stories of people tell how they were captured in slavery. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And
Yeah.
the music, the songs are in there
The
too.
songs, yeah, some of the
That's
songs. Yeah, because I used to do a presentation for my class on slavery. And
I wonder if we can still get it. Will you?
I don't know, it's old, it's been around for a
And you
while.
can tell.
You've
Like
got
some of
songs.
It's been around
mine.
for a while.
So you used to use.
But I would act out the role of different slaves, and then I mix it in with film clips on slavery. And then
You have your glasses on.
I would turn my, I had the lights are out, I had candles, I had music in the background, and so I just kind of transformed the kids into,
into that era
yeah,
of
they
slavery.
would like
and
to be a slave, yeah.
That was
I was-
good. That's
I
a
did
good
that for
thing
my
to do.
ninth graders, you know, I
Yeah.
haven't done that in a long time.
How did they react to that?
They were just quiet, they were still, they were very good, they were just, you know, I tried to get them to feel what was it
Well,
like to
they
be like that.
should.
Yeah, and they did.
I wanted you to look and see what year it was
Oh, what
published.
year? Oh,
As
you
I said,
probably can
yeah.
still get a version of it.
Yeah,
You
Mom,
can go
you
to
can get it. You can get it
Amazon.com,
from
you probably can,
Amazon.com.
yeah.